welcome, and it's that time of the week again. It's the AutoJet Business Show. I'm your host, David Zidel, and we're going to talk business. Tonight, we've got Lynn Joffe with us. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, good to be here.
Great, and when I say tonight we're going to get Lynn's story, we really are, because tonight is all around storytelling. But as you know, if you've listened to the show before, I give you a little bit of a business story. And the story is around a quote that says, "We rely on data to tell us what has happened, but stories to tell us what it means." And when you're in business, you have to collect data, and we call it quantification. You have to quantify everything. And if you've listened to the last few weeks that we've had of entrepreneurs, that all say you've got to know your numbers. You've got to know exactly what your numbers are and what it means. But it's the one side is knowing your numbers. The other thing is knowing what it means, understanding the story behind it. And you have to know it in one of three ways. It's the what, the so what, and the now what. The what is understanding your numbers. What are we looking at? What is happening in our business? What is our turnover? What is our profit? All those things that you need to know. And when we spoke last time to Clive, he spoke about your runway for your business. That's the what, knowing the what. The so what means the meaning. What is the meaning of those numbers? What does it mean? So a lot of people, and this is even within bigger companies, they collect a lot of data, but they don't know what it means. And when you try and understand what it means, putting it into a story tells really what that means. And the third bit is as crucial, but you can only do the third bit once you've done 1 and 2. And the third bit is now what? Now, what do we do with that information? Once we've understood what the story is telling us, what do we do about it? And it's interesting that I'm starting with the story because Lynn Joffe is a storyteller. And Lynn was born in London. She's been raised on 4 different continents. And she says that she's been a storyteller since she exited the womb. And I wonder if maybe even while you were in the womb, you were creating those stories.
I've been told stories.
That's true. And she started her business life actually as a secretary. And on the first job, she found something called copywriting. She didn't know that that job even existed or what the job was. And she followed that. And one of the key things she says is follow your passion. And copywriting spoke to her and she followed her passion. And then at age 40, she produced a 13-episode jazz series for SABC called Bejazzled. And then at age 60, she published her first book, The Gospel According to Wonder B. Lazarus. And I think what's amazing is this is building up your story. This is kind of showing you that you can pivot and you can change at each stage. And don't just stick to the script that maybe others have told you. And recently, Lynn has pivoted and used her vast experience towards the fastest growing platform on planet. And that's correct, podcasting. How did you know that about yourself? And her brainchild, Solid Gold Storytime, was recently awarded Podcast of the Year award. So she won an award as Podcast of the Year award. So overall, Lynn Joffe has written and produced a vast array of storytelling projects for radio, stage, and TV. The theme throughout it, and we say she's pivoted and she's changed, but throughout it's all underlying is storytelling. So she's going to share a little bit later on with us, Lynn, when it's appropriate to start sharing those. I'd like you to discuss the 12 tips to rebranding your own story. But before we get there, I'm tempted to ask you, so what's your story? And maybe we start off with, if you can explain exactly what is copywriting, what attracted you to that, and how does that link to storytelling?
So, in other words, about the words, it's all about the words. I was never good at anything at school. I was terrible at sport. I came last in egg and spoon races. I was kicked in the shins. I had glasses that were knocked off in netball. And in every school, girls' school, all over the world, there's a mockery involved and bullying involved. The only thing I was ever good at was in English, which turned out to be the language of a composition or the expression of a word or the learning to read. I remember learning to read. I remember saying fee, fi, fo, fum in the classroom, and everybody looked at me. So there was a little bit of an actress in there as well. So in a way, the storytelling umbrella of now, and you've now outed me my age to all and sundry, which is really not what we had in mind. But in the sense, it's almost like, Picasso had his blue period and his rose period, and then his time of tumult, and then his time of ease. I think that if one is in touch with I want to call it a superpower. Words are my superpower, David. I'm good at music. I'm okay at music. I can do a show or two, and I've done a few cabarets. I'm a good academic, actually, in the sense that I've done an MA and I can understand the so what. When you said what, there has to be a purpose. But the words of copywriting is doing one sentence that can turn somebody's head and make them buy your stuff, but make them buy your stuff in a way that they can resonate, which usually involves a story about the product, from the product to the people. To brand something is not just to give it a name, it's to give it an identity. And I've always found the words to do that in the copy, that you then get to make a TV commercial, you get to make radio spots, you get to see it in print. There's a great satisfaction for me as a nice Jewish girl who was expected nothing else more of than getting married, having the babies, perpetuating the culture, which I couldn't do at a very young age, even being married at a very young age to a man of Orthodox persuasion. It was something that gave me a sense of identity away from the expectations that anybody had of me. So from copy to writing, copywriting sounds like a person with a stamp in a post box. But the copywriting is the writing of the copy, and a book is the writing of 100,000 headlines. When I finished the 5 years that it took me to write Wonder, and now that you've outed me, I went back to Wits in my middle 50s. I behaved like a teenager. I couldn't believe I got the job because 40 years had gone by with me doing copywriting and then producing and then having my own business, and so it rolls. It was a great time to be a woman. It was a great time to be me. It was a great time to have to be post-Mandela and have that Rainbow Nation miracle feeling, which I get from time to time now because it's actually gone a little pallid. But the stories of, and now, right now, as I am post-Wonder, and what I wonder what happens next, Wonder, is to bring the threads of everything I've done together. In other words, my business acumen, such as it is, my ability or talent, if you would like. Talent is nothing without hard work, nothing at all. So bringing in the experience I've had since I'm now in my 60s. I started working in my very early 20s. I've been working in advertising for 45 years, 20 before the internet was invented and 20 after. So it's actually, in a way, if you would call it, I've often wondered why, for example, universities fire people at 65. It's like that you reach a peak and then you're gone. If this is a peak, and I don't know if it is because my family lives to very ripe ages, is if this is they call it the third age or something like that, is if this is the time now, I don't have children to look after, I have a marriage that's fairly stable, I have words to write that have been difficult for me because I had a death in the family that broke everything. As I was flying to the moon, my sister died of cancer. So I've been humbled, if you would like to call it that. I have been grounded by my grief. And now that I'm picking myself up again, and thank you for this sort of platform to encourage other people, because you do feel I'm aged, birthed, ethnic, whatever, the country has gone this way, it's gone that way. How do you survive inside this? And now it's the whole world that's like this. So the words that I have for advertising, which is that you get a brief, you answer the brief, you do a clever line, you spend 3 weeks crafting a radio spot. You're taught how to write, you're taught how to sell the writing. And in a way, maybe all art or all literature that involves words is selling the writing. You've got to be interested in what is being written. So I don't know if that answers you, but from copy to copywriting is all part of storytelling, and the literature I'm starting to produce, which at my ripe age, I couldn't have written as a younger woman anyway.
So I think, yes, if does that answer the question? Well, I expected a 2-sentence answer, and you fulfilled it. If you're wondering who I'm talking to, it's Lynn Joffe. And if you have any questions, please, you can WhatsApp us on 0861 895 1019. That's 0861 895 1019. And when we come back, I'm going to give you a quote that I think talks about copywriting, and then we'll link it to your book. But we'll do that after the break. Welcome back. I'm David Zidel. I'm talking to Lynn Joffe, and we're talking about storytelling. Just that number again, if you want to send through a message, the WhatsApp is 0861 895 1019. So Lynn, before we went to the break, you were talking about writing a book and the culmination of all of that, and the copywriting. And while you were talking, I was thinking of a quote, a Winston Churchill quote that said, "I wrote a short letter because I didn't have time to write a long one," which in essence says, can you try and bring everything down to the essence of it? And for me, kind of while you were talking, I was thinking that maybe that's what copywriting is. Maybe copywriting is trying to write a book on one page.
It's trying to write a book on one sentence. What one of the challenges, if I say so, I'm 20 years old, I'm newlywed, I'm now at varsity doing a BA, I'm a very ambitious young girl, and I see what copy is, and I leave the secretarial just like my mother and start on 250 rand a month doing the headlines for things like toilet rolls and computer parts and dog biscuits and whatever came my way.
But it excited you.
It was so you get the brief. You have to have a brief, and the brief is usually about, say, 5 pages long, and it's a brand personality and the strategy and the market, and which is the strategy side. And then you take that and you condense that right down into one idea. It's really more an idea than it is words on a page, but the idea has to be expressed somehow in the human race. So the words are, for example, my first headline that I wrote, I remember, the headline said, "Flat wadang, flat wadang, flat wadang, flat wadang." And it said, "You've just read the fastest game in the world, now go and buy it at Macro," whatever it would be.
Right.
So it was finding a concept inside a piece of communication. Let's just leave the advertising, whether it's right, whether capitalism is right, and being able to communicate an idea, which is actually what we call emotional brand benefits. So the emotional brand benefits of the game would be the excitement of the game. The practical side is it's made of plastic, it costs 2 rand, whatever, which is then retail, which is retail. Retail is the greatest challenge to any writer. I challenge any writer to write a good retail ad, to make something like sale exciting. So I was taken by it. We did Russells, we did the OK Bazaars. I then found radio copy. They'll say your words. Somebody like Michael Fridjon will come in and say a word. Janice Honeyman will cast in a radio spot. And so then, as at a very young age, I would be directing these famous actors of Pact in the day, and I had an affinity for that. I had a knack for it, and so I could write it and then produce it. So in a way, I mean, anybody. So you start off as just the lowly copywriter, then you find you can produce, then you find you can produce in multiple languages. And apart from even doing the math on multiple languages, nobody wanted to do the multiple languages because it didn't expose them to Lurie Awards, and it didn't have the shine of those 3 words that could be those final words. And I found that very challenging. So I started, in other words, language, if you like, or words, wherever they are, be they in a novel, which is 100,000 headlines. When I say that, every word in that novel, not say it could be a headline, was examined finally in the manner that I would have been a creative director over my own copywriting.
So for me, the story that's coming through here, and I mentioned your age because it's appropriate to this, and I know you don't mind it.
I don't mind it.
But it's the fact that kind of as you grow older, you're the accumulation of everything you've been through before. You're the sum of all the parts that have come before.
And more.
and more. And
So
then
the
there's,
gestalt of yourself.
and there's the ladder of progression, and not being scared to pivot, and not being scared
Nice.
to go into a podcast and do something that the youngsters would say, this is for youngsters, and then winning an award with that.
Well, you see, I won the award for the podcast because I didn't know there were awards to be won, which is interesting because that goes back to my 13-year-old self, where I won Best First Year Camper at an Alan Isaacs camp, not knowing. And the following year thinking, if there's Best First Year, there must be Best All Round. And the moment that I started to aim for it, it fell apart. And because when in 2022 my sister got sick and everything fell apart, I realized that I could I didn't realize anything, but in starting again, I feel like I'm a teenager again. It's almost like starting again with my mentors who were twice my age, now half my age, and learning again. It's like picking yourself out of the absolute lowest place you can go. And because of the emotional time I went through, I didn't realize grief was quite as a thing as it was, and it's been 3 years, is finding the joy in anything. So finding the joy in doing children's stories, which I've done also for years, in an audio platform with a collaborator, a Solid Gold podcast, who still are showing me the ropes, and did something that came from my heart. It was in a way almost for my sister, to connect with that child energy of my baby sister who's no longer, and her niece and all the little children, if you like, which is also, again, David, words. It's words for songs. When I do the children's songs, here's another part of the ladder, which is the DNA chain. When I went through menopause, because now you know how old I am, when I went through menopause, children's stories started pouring out of me. Now, I didn't have my own children. I never gave birth to kids. But when I went through what I call the bleeding to breeding years which we all have, ladies, is what, once I was kind of free of my biological destiny, if you like, these children's stories started pouring out of me, and they're not pouring anymore, they're more spattering. And if I could do nothing else and be Mother Teresa of children's stories, that's all I would do, but I can't because I have to earn a living. And I've gone back to copywriting, gone back to the roots of getting a brief, working on social media rather than in a print ad, working actually with a compatriot in Cape Town who knows more about the AI, not the AI, the digital construction of things. And I'm learning because I don't know anything. I don't know how to switch the computer on, man. Get over it, Luddite. So the things I asked other people to do for me always, it's called learned helplessness. It's particularly with the internet. My husband comes, it's all set up. I call him when I need him, like, hello, it's not working. I haven't switched on the plug. It's no excuse, anybody out there. It's like, then learn it. Go and get a YouTube video. And so
So one of my things, and part of this program is around education and learning. And there's a quote, and I hope I can remember it correctly, but it says, you must live as if it's your last day, but learn as if you're going to live forever. So we never, ever stop learning. Just listening to your story and around, if you thought that there was going to be an award, then you didn't win it.
No.
And when you didn't think there was an award, you won it. And for me, that says the lesson is follow your passion. Like your why was to create the stories, not to win the awards. And that just happened to be someone else recognizing that you're doing your passion. And sometimes in life, I think we chase the rewards rather than the internal rewards. And your rewards are internal. I can see it. I can see it coming out. Your storytelling, your passion.
This is going to be the biggest cliche, but if I would ever be remembered for anything on a tombstone, do what you love and the money will follow. Has always been my kind of motto, and it's always come to pass. However, when it doesn't come to pass, in other words, when you are toiling on something that has absolutely no financial gain for a long time, maybe money in the quote is a metaphor, because do what you love and the reward is possibly not even financial. I wish it could be. My novel, which is my proudest achievement, if you like, cost me money because it's like a movie that's got no marketing.
Mm.
I realized from my advertising experience when I was like a 2-year-old, 55-year-old, that there were things that had to be done that I would have done had I been a client of myself. And so when you spoke about the ladder, I like the ladder, but I prefer it to be a bit more freedom. I prefer it to be like a DNA string, almost like a rope of all of the things that I have done. My mother told me when I was 4 years old, I was teaching nurses in a hospital how to fold the towels because I'd gone in for my tonsils. And she knew when I was 4, and if I think about that 4-year-old, I can see little Lindy doing that little chutzpah girl. So in a way, I mean, do you ever change, or is it? I always say to people, the difference between us is that I've got more of me than you've got of you because I've lived longer than you have. So I can be 2, I can be 4, I can be 21, which I was in Durban, and it took me 2 weeks to recover because I behaved like a teenager. And then I found the slam poets, who was also words. Then I found the writers, who was also words. Then I found, so in a way, my linguistic ability from the womb, because I was a little talker, as you could probably guess. And the words, in fact, because storytelling doesn't have to be written down in words. And then we could do multicultural storytelling for different cultures, for children from different languages. I don't have to speak the language. So I'm just segueing into being able to teach it, read it, evaluate it, write it. I suppose as a 6-year-old rather than a 66-year-old, thank you, is that I've, in a way, that rebirth, that repivot includes the podcasting because it's a platform to put those stories. I'm now bringing guest artists. Amanda Horwitz read her beautiful Dashhund book. So in a way, there's a lot of Ubuntu. If there's passion, I believe it's got to be bigger than just for you. It turns out to be so.
So if I can ask you now from you did the copywriting, and I want to go in because the DNA and your 12 tips, I want to get to that. But before we get to that, what was the book about? Why did you write the book? And it's got quite a cryptic name, The Gospel According to Wonder Bee Lazarus. Just unpack your book for us a bit.
So I registered, I submitted to do a Master of Arts at the University of Witwatersrand. And when I was accepted, I just couldn't believe I got the job. I needed the structure, I needed the discipline, the business was flying, I could actually take the time, so I was almost re-teenaged again. And you have to do a proposal, write a proposal of what you're going to write, then you write it, then you tell them you've written it. That's also a tip for anything in business. So I had to do a proposal. My proposal was going to be, I wanted a study, literary study of anti-Semitism. I wanted to unpack it. I wanted to unpack what it meant. I wanted to unpack it historically. And I also wanted to unpack it through my own life experience, which at that point, and this was pre everything that has happened in the last 4 years, but I have experienced anti-Semitism as a very little girl. I killed Jesus apparently when I was 7, for example. So I had always had a little bit of a more of an insight than most South African Jewish children had because I'd been raised overseas and I'd been exposed, but I was exposed in South Africa as well. So I started off writing memoir of my experiences transplanted here in my teens and my Lynn experience. And then I found the glyph of the gypsy girl of Gaziantep, who's the girl on the front of my cover, who is a mosaic from the 2nd century CE. And when I saw her, this is almost the magic of writing, the magic of creativity. She became Wonder Bee Lazarus. In other words, it started off as a me, I, this, and then became the character that I then spent another 5 years writing, who could, and then I made her immortal. She was accidentally cursed with immortality, because that's what happens with the Wandering Jew. So the Wandering Jew is a myth which has been rear-engineered to the Bible by medieval monks. So I took my character Wonder back to the Bible, back to the beginning, to see where this all began. So it's a serio-comic, transgressive view on being a Jewish female through the ages, where anti-Semitism in basic fact reared its head everywhere she went. You know, a little bit of a Forrest Gump in history.
So it sounds like quite a heavy book, or is it
very
comedy?
funny?
Is it a funny book?
Hilarious.
Okay, fantastic.
If I would choose it, if it ever became a Netflix series, it would be, it had to be funny. I wanted to take a very serious matter with the lightest touch. And because of, again, if you want to call it not the talent, the ability to do that was something that Wits could bring out in me because of the structure and discipline and deadlines. And I was at my desk every day for 5 years.
So the book came as a result of doing the course?
The book came out. You had to do a work of creative fiction or non-fiction, and then you had to write a reflective essay on what you'd written. But after I had written it, after I'd done it at Wits, because it had to be a particular genre, it was a picaresque novel, I worked with a professional editor to get it ready for publication. That took another 2 years. And I worked 9 pregnancies on this book.
By the way, if anyone's thinking who we're listening to, if you're in your car, this is Lynn Joffe, copywriter, creative director, content creator in many
That's
different
what it is
forms.
now, yeah.
And I'd like to find out, you mentioned that you've got this, and I think it's the DNA strand that links to the 12 tips of rebranding your own story. Can you tell us what that is and unpack it for us?
Let me try. So every, it's like a cobbler's children have no shoes. If you're a copywriter, you're always doing it for other people, putting yourself in the shoes of whoever, whatever the brand, tone, feeling, and everything is. And so at Creatrix, which is my company, I've done this with Creatrix, where I want Creatrix as a female creator. So I've always kind of liked it. And if I've had a whole BEE kind of magical realism company, which has now been severely condensed. But then who am I, Lynn, as opposed to being me, the CEO of Creatrix, or the storyteller of a book, or whoever, all of these kind of chameleon-like tendencies that I have. What is the umbrella of that? And I sound like an American. What is the umbrella of that? The umbrella of that is storyteller, which now encompasses the coaching, the teaching, the branding, the storytelling, the mother tongue storytelling, the musical branding, the mnemonics, the shmonics, and everything and the ability to be a reasonably good businesswoman, everyone. This madness that I have is solidified by grandparents who were shopkeepers, who never went into credit, who taught me the basics of staying alive, which is why I've been able to do what I love, and the money will follow, because there's a purpose to stay alive, I guess. The purpose is you said to me the other day when I said to you I'm doing podcasts, and you said something about, it was something you said about, if you're doing them so for tzedakahs for free, then you must be in a position to not have to do it for money. It was that kind of discussion, and we started to speak about that and unpack that. I do it with the same intention I would do as if Eskom was paying me R1 million. It's nicer to know that you are being paid, but the way that the work is done is in a sense almost free of financial burden, because it doesn't, you're not trapped by it. But I say that having had a massive, huge business, which I have now brought down to just me again. So you asked about the DNA crib flip. So I thought to myself, with all I do a few keynotes here and there, and people ask me, how did you do this? And sometimes it can be, be a storyteller. Everyone can be a storyteller. I can teach people how to become their own brand storyteller, but it involves the writing and it involves the commitment. But these 12 points.
So before you get to the 12 points, just on, you talk about anybody can be a storyteller.
Everyone is a storyteller.
Or everyone is a storyteller. I attended a while back one of your workshops where you gave us a little trinket and you told us to tell a story about this trinket and just write what came. And I was astounded at what actually came out of me that I didn't even know existed of the storytelling, and you prompted it a bit here and there, which was amazing. So
nice to remember that.
We're going to get to those 12 points because I think they're crucial. But you talk about having to make money yourself while doing things. The radio station has to do the same. So we'll get after the advert.
It's going to be quite difficult to put them into a storytelling space, other than to say, once upon a time, there was a little rebel girl who was dumped in South Africa, not knowing there was apartheid, not knowing she was Jewish, not knowing she was a girl, and had to survive inside the concentration camp that was apartheid at the time. Rock up here in 2025, this girl claimed South Africa for herself because Nelson Mandela gave her the right. Her grandparents gave her the values, and she went on to take advantage of the opportunities that existed in South Africa without fear, without favor, and with an absolute passion for life. She gave up a green card. She committed to the country and still will be there to switch off the lights if we still have electricity. So having said all of that, in other words, in a nutshell summary of, and have been through through a recent crisis, which made me really reconsider everything in my life and start again. So if I look at these 12 points that were kind of when I was and everything was lovely and everyone had a bathroom and suite and we had a swimming pool and 14 checks and 15 holidays, I was high on the hog and then I fell through the bottom of the earth. Having said that, then coming back to these 12. So do you want me to run through the 12? So
I think so, please.
Okay, this is a copywriter thing. It's an anagram. I think medical students have to learn parts of the body like this. So my anagram is DNA crib flips. And if this was a studio, we could show you because I've got little kids doing crib flips. And I liked it because I like the DNA. I like the idea of what is within each person. And as odd of a little girl that I was and of a big girl that I am, and the places that I go and the spaces I inhabit, if I realize now, being as mature as I am and looking at what I've become in this world, my D stands for do what you love and the money will follow. I can't, and
so
money.
So we got number one without
So number
realizing
one,
that we had number one.
exactly.
You told us that already.
D for D, do what you love and the money will follow, but you must do it and you must love it.
Correct.
You know.
So just before we go on, a message did come through with somebody saying, and I like the way they put it. They said, "New." So what's the name of the book? So if you didn't get the name of the book, maybe you can give the name.
Well, the gospel according to Wanda B. Lazarus. It's published by Majaji Books, and I think it might still be available at Exclusive Books. I'd have to check because it's been out for a while, but it's enjoying a little renaissance. Okay, D, do what you love and the money will follow.
Right.
N, again, duh. And you've got to believe this. Network is net worth. I was taught this by an American.
Love that.
Network is net worth. Now, I've been absent for 3 years from the business, and the business was all multicultural radio. Now I'm pivoting to podcasting and writing books. So that network, if you need it and want it and you can't be insincere in it, it's not like, hello, I haven't seen you for 3 years. Have you got any work for me? It's human relationships. It's what you've built. This applies to literature as well. When I've said to my girls who used to work for me and then I worked for them, what do you recommend to me as I read a book a week? By the time you're my age, you read 5,000 books. You cannot read 5,000 books in a week. So educating yourself in terms of that you don't go out to meet someone because of the network, but what your value is to them is what that networking is. And sometimes you'll surprise yourself. You don't have to be Miss Popular. Okay, so that's the N and the A.
So just with that, before you go on, so your network and the worth in that, I think what a lot of people miss in that, and you kind of touched on it a bit, is it's not just taking, it's giving. So you're reading all these books and having information is so that you could share that as well. So a network is about sharing with each other.
I think you've added into that, and I think that's very important because it's communication. If I could say only connect. If I had to write something because I was editing for an anthology and I had to give just like a wise wisdom phrase, and I thought of a few, but now that we've had this conversation, I think it's E.M. Foster. Only connect. If that means everything, it's the tikkun olam of our faith. If you can see when people are insincere in networking. Carry a business card, and the A. So the A of DNA just comes from The Secret. Everybody's done it. Ask, believe, receive. It's better than don't ask, don't believe, and get nothing. So even if it isn't a religious tenet of truth, it's probably better to be optimistic than pessimistic, really. And it doesn't always come in the way that you want it, and it isn't kind of, to me, a trade exchange with a man with a beard in the sky. But to actually, and this one I've been very bad in, if this was like kind of a test I was doing on myself, because I haven't believed in a way that I was worthy of ask, because I had.
And asking is asking from him, from yourself.
Well, you see, I like to call it the universe, David, because I don't, with no disrespect to anyone who believes in a, I think it might be even a higher power, but it's a wider power. So if don't want to go too much into this, if my sister who's passed is now wherever she is, in whatever realm she exists or not, she exists inside my heart and soul. So if I ask to be relieved of the guilt and fear and shame and grief that I feel, I've got to actually believe that can be a healing process. But I mean, that wasn't why I put it here. I was like, just, it'd be really nice if we got that job. Oh, lovely, let's do a budget. So it's that's why I say these things are very curt. So that's DNA. Crib, I'm just going to do them quickly because I'm going to run it. C is chutzpah.
Is it chutzpah?
Sometimes it's with an H. Chutzpah with courtesy. My school motto when I was little was by learning and courtesy. I didn't know what it meant. Chutzpah can be very rude, and you're seen as very pushy and very rude, which we are, it is. But with a bit of courtesy, you can be kind with it. All the C words, the kind's not spelled with a C, but I like chutzpah. R is for rights of the inner child. When you spoke just now about what was brought out when you were doing the workshop with the little items, the inner child, I'm a great believer in this. The inner child within yourself, or child, it's very Jungian. Within yourself, I believe that everyone still has that in them. And maybe you need a little bit of help sometimes from guides and Buddhas on the road. But that inner child's where all the creativity comes from. That's why I say I came out of the womb reading stories.
So the R is for reading?
No, the R is for rights of the inner child.
The rights, okay.
The rights of the inner child, yeah.
So I want to do quickly, we need to go for an ad break, but before we get there, I want to get halfway. So what's the I, the first I?
The I actually stands for a 100%. And it's something you said just now, which is interesting. I don't know if you were cheating on me. 100% innocence, 100% intelligence. You put it in a different way. So that to me is the one, the I for the crib is go in with wonder. And I've just been appointed to a board of some publication thing. I don't really understand what's going on, but I have a capacity to understand. So I don't have to keep going, what are you talking about? I've got to absorb it all, go home, see how I fit in. And I like being innocent because I'm not really innocent. But with that intelligence comes a certain humility. So there are values behind this. And the B stands for brand.
Oh,
sorry.
We got to pay the bills. So we're going to take a break. We'll do the other six. Isn't that halfway?
Well, it was 3/4 of a word, but it's fine.
So interesting. We saw that differently. So Lynn saw halfway as getting to past the second word, and I saw it as the letters. So 6 letters. So we've done the 6 letters.
So you left like 3/4 of the way through one word, which was the word crib. But since we have cribbed, I've changed the wording of B. So the B in crib actually should say, be your own brand birth doula. So a doula is used in a lot of Eastern cultures it's usually the woman that helps the baby to be birthed, not a midwife, but the woman that takes care of the woman giving birth. So if you can rebirth yourself, you almost become your own birth doula. The yogis would understand it, but actually it's also about the inner child. It's also about self-resilience, self-preservation. I've been living on my own without parental guidance for a long time. So it's in a sense parenting yourself. Shall I do the flips quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. This is such a cliche, and it's worked with, I've worked with a very lot of very young, beautiful, talented Black young women, South African chicks. And they go through my hands, and it isn't necessarily fun. I'm very particular, and I've always said to them, you rise to my level, I don't sink to yours. I'm a whip ass, I'm a dominatrix at work in a way, but if you can keep up with what I expect of you, brain surgery wise, we can work together. So the F is fail. Fail means first action in learning. You've got to fail, you have to fail, you can't not. nobody's perfect. So first action in learning, then you go fail, sail, tail, how many actions? Learn it, grow from it, make mistakes. The L is, this is a Gary Player thing, I think. Luck equals preparation plus opportunity. Be ready for wherever it is. If I have to do my Wanda shtick to Stephen Fry in the foyer of Monte Casino, I know what to say.
So you mentioned Stephen Fry, and I saw on your book that on the front,
yes,
you got a quote from Stephen Fry.
So, from Sir Stephen Fry.
For people who don't know Stephen Fry, Sir Stephen Fry, world famous from the
Stephen
UK.
Fry is a comedian, actor, writer, poet, polymath from the UK who has recently been knighted by Prince Philip. So he's Sir Stephen Fry, to whom I reached out, who read the book early, who absolutely loved it, and has been with me ever since. Was my fairy godfather.
So when you say you reached out to him, did you just send it in the post, or
no? You go back to chutzpah with courtesy. You go back to chutzpah with courtesy.
So here's your DNA or your 12 tips in action. So give us
12 tips in action. So if you are a copy goes back to copywriting. I was given the opportunity to send an email, and I wanted to ask Sir Stephen if he would like a copy of my book because I thought he might like it. It was pretty much as casual as that, but obviously with a sort of back end lash for myself. It took me about 4 days to compose that email. And I'm a good writer. I'm a fast writer. I didn't want to be too fangirly. I didn't want to be too intimate. I didn't want to be too presumptuous. And then I spoke to my editor and said, oh my God, Stephen Fry. And she said, well, don't expect too much from him because maybe he's just too polite in English. And then I thought, I didn't think of that. So I said, well, if you'd like to say something about the book, it would be very nice. And he did. And then I came back to him and I said, would you mind if I quoted you? And he was fine with that. And I've kept a correspondence with him for the last 4 years.
Wow. And on your, I presume it's a second edition of the book, there's a quote that, or the writer, he talks about your book on the front cover.
So interestingly, you should say that because it was COVID, the book was coming out in August, which it didn't because of COVID. So the book got bumped up, or whatever you say, to December. And we had made our first contact in the October, on the 4th of October. So when he had come back so graciously with a review, the short review, it was the book cover was going to print, so it was already on the cover. And as it happened later, when I got shortlisted for this and longlisted for that, he then elaborated a little bit. And I think that's also part of the chutzpah of things. Luck equals preparation plus opportunity. This is another tip. When I went out to this person, I made sure I had a website. I made sure I had an extract. I made sure my ducks were in a row completely. And that I was professional, but I was there's a bit of chutzpah.
That's great.
Okay.
So we are running out of time, so let's go through
luck, preparation. I is integrity. I is integrity. Integrity is what you say, what you do, and what you think are in alignment. That is like a life lesson for me. And very often it isn't in alignment all the time. So then admit it isn't integrity. You know what I mean? You're paying a bribe to a traffic cop.
But have an aim towards that is what you say.
I think that when you true this above all, to thine own self be true, and it shall follow as the day the night, thou shalt not then be false to any man. That's okay. And that's so it's that. P is purpose over task. Nearly done. Finish purpose over task, which is what Disney does. Make the little things count. And S is social is your hashtag BFF. I'm afraid to tell everyone, if you don't have a presence, you don't have a brand. If you don't have a brand, you don't have a presence. That's my DNA cryptlips.
Wow. So I just want to unpack one last thing. Your purpose over
task.
Which means?
So if you're at Disneyland and there's a kid who's dropped his ice cream on the floor, the provider will give the kid another ice cream because the purpose is the kid has a good time. The task is give him another ice cream.
I love that. So we really have to wrap up, and Craig's busy signing and telling me. And Craig, thank you for running this. Just want to run through the DNA quickly. The DNA crypt. So it's do what you love is the first one. Your network. Ask for what you want. and believe you'll receive. Chutzpah, and then it's the 100% intelligence and innovation. The next one was be the doula. Then it was fail. You have to learn to fail and then get it. Then it's the luck. Then it's the integrity, purpose over task. And the last one was social. And Craig's really going frantic that I have to wrap up. So thank you very much. This has been Lynn Joffe,
Thank you.
the content creator. I'm David Zidel, and this has been the Orchard Business Show.